Welcome into the Russ Joy Show. I'm Russ Joy. You figured that out because you're smart. It's also the name of the show. Welcome in. I know what you're thinking. Russ, why are you doing a show at 2:45 in the afternoon, the same day that the Phillies are playing a game against the Seattle Mariners, at a time when the Phillies are up 3-1 in the game? The answer is simple. I'm an idiot. But the longer version of this answer is because I felt like it. Now, what a wild day it's been, by the way, for your team, your town, your Philadelphia Phillies. You get a Max Kepler home run in the game. We also have the story that kind of comes out about Nick Castellanos very much appearing to be in some version, it would appear, of a platoon. And the fact that Rob Thompson is trying to very gingerly navigate the outfield situation with the team. It's really not our big focus today, though. However, there are many focuses on today's show, but that, oddly enough, is not one of them. Now, we have a little bit of news, a few notes, right? We have a Colin Cowherd note where he has very much appeared to have fallen in love with the Philadelphia Eagles. We have Major League Baseball notes. We have a lot more. I have allergies. There's so much to get into today. And the MLB TV deals and the reported deals and waiting on a few of those specifics to come out, that to me is the most intriguing thing going on right now in sports. And so we will get there a little bit later on in the show. But the Colin Cowherd of it all is probably where we're going to begin. Now, actually, you know what? Scratch that. Rewind, reset, re-rack. Let's actually start with the Phillies, who are in the midst of a game where, again, as of right now, top of the sixth, they're up 3-1. We'll see what happens. And for all the people who listen after the fact on the podcast feed or who watch this thing back on YouTube, Facebook, and X, maybe things will have gone awry. I would certainly hope not. I want to talk really briefly about what we saw on Tuesday night because it was one of the most maddening Phillies games in recent memory for a very brief moment in time. And it's funny because, like, a couple days ago, we watched Jordan Romano almost attempt to implode and put the Phillies in a position where they were going to have to send Duran out to the mound. And it was a pretty ugly performance out of him, and then everybody thought he was going to get DFA'd. He did not. But I want to go back to last night because at this point, it very much feels like everybody's starting to give their flowers to JT Realmuto. But I think on this show, we haven't exactly given the guy all of his flowers. And so I think today is a very good day for us to just take a moment and kind of recap where things were at with JT Realmuto a little bit earlier this season. And if you remember, a lot of times when we talked about players that were going to be coming up for new contracts, we pretty much would always go out of our way to mention that it's insane that Ranger Suarez isn't signed. We'd go out of our way to mention the fact that it was insane Kyle Schwarber wasn't signed. And then when you looked at JT Realmuto, there were moments where you'd have to say to yourself, all right, like the season wasn't going nearly as well as I'm sure he would have wanted it to in a contract year. And it probably wasn't going as well as the Phillies would hope it would. And so there was probably a thought that, all right, at the end of the season, depending on how things go, depending on what the contract negotiations look like, if you're the Phillies, do you want to re-sign a 34-year-old catcher to a whole hell of a lot more money? And remember, like it felt like his days as the best catcher in baseball were long gone. And yet, if we're being honest and if we're being fair here, he's been pretty damn good, especially over the last month and a half, 2 months. I actually want to hit you with some numbers today because I think that hitting you with a little bit of facts to support the argument is probably a good thing. When the season started he had 84 at-bats in the month of April. He hit 262. In May, he fell off a cliff. He had 83 at-bats, so one fewer at-bat. He hit 205. Then he rebounded in June, hitting 293. In July, he was simply on fire at the plate. In 79 at-bats, he posted a 354 average. And thus far in the month of August, he's hitting 333. Now, if you take a look at his performance over the last week or so, he's hitting 381. Last 15 days, he's hitting 375. If you want to go over the last 30 days, 307. Now, you can look at whatever hitting metric you want to look at. I tend to, at least at this point in JT Realmuto's career, I'm not as concerned with his slugging. I'm honestly not as concerned with his OPS, although that has been fantastic over the last few weeks. I look at his ability to put the ball in play, and I look at his ability to get on base, and I do look at his ability to hit for average. And the fact that his average is up after an absolutely dreadful May, where we all kind of looked at it and said, oh shit, like there's nobody really in the pipeline right now that you feel great about giving that everyday job to. What are they going to do at the end of the year? He has rebounded in such a critical way. It's kind of hard to look at this as anything other than a massive win for this team. Now, I will note, last night he had one of the most clutch hits of, in recent memory as a Philly, at least. When the Phils get out to a nice lead, everything's humming along in the game last night. Christopher Sanchez gets pulled after 96 pitches, goes 6 in the third inning, gives up 2 runs. It's a nice performance, 12 strikeouts. Great game out of Christopher Sanchez. Then you hand the ball to Ryan Kerkering, and the thought is Kerkering's going to be able to get this thing done, get you through the 7th inning, and then maybe you go to a Robertson in the 8th and then a Duran in the 9th, and, game over. We're all happy-go-lucky. We're ready to go home. Everybody feel good about, what's going down. Except that's not exactly what happened, right? Like, the Sanchez game was great. Christopher Sanchez was fantastic. Ryan Kerkering comes in, gives up 2 runs, and you're like, oh shit, now it's a tie 4-4 game. Who's going to be the one to make the impact play? And despite the fact that Realmuto's played very, very well in the last 2 months, I'm not sure that he would have been the guy that you would have thought was going to flip the game on its head, and yet he was. And Realmuto goes out, crushes a 2-run home run, gives you a 6-4 lead, gets you set up for success, and then they eventually turn it over to Robertson in the 8th. You get Duran in the 9th. We don't get to see the entrance of Duran, which obviously people were very upset about. They were very pissed off about, because in fairness, like, we all want to see the Duran entrance. It is the closest thing to a pro wrestling entrance in real sports. And I will go out really quickly. I didn't intend on doing this initially, but I saw the tweet go out. And so I was like, all right, this is probably worth at least a little bit of a conversation, right? Like, everybody wants to see the Duran entrance. It doesn't matter that it's the same thing every time, although I saw they changed the spider on the entrance. Amy Fadul of NBC Sports Philadelphia, she tweeted something out last night, and it kind of got me thinking a little bit. And it was about that decision to go to commercial break when Duran is coming out. So I want to go over to Amy Fadul because I think she's level-headed. I don't think Amy Fadul has a single hater in the city. I think she's a very positively viewed upon member of the media sphere in Philadelphia. So Amy Fadul tweets this out last night. She says, "For those wondering, I hear you, but it's not necessarily about commercial money for when you have to take breaks. It's about timing for the end of game. Like, if you don't take the break before the 9th and something happens, you're stuck with extra breaks and no time to take it. Meaning, you're stuck with extra commercial breaks that you are committed to, but there's no actual time that you can take those commercial breaks." Now, is there a way potentially for NBC Sports Philly to line up one or more of these commercial breaks earlier in the game somehow, some way, a little bit different with baseball? Is there a way for them to get one of those extra commercial breaks in so that you can have the full Duran entrance? Is there a path to potentially doing the Duran entrance and then going to a quick break? The thing that I'm interested in is, like, they don't do picture-in-picture. Like, maybe it's the pro wrestling fan in me. The thing that I don't fully understand, and, like, maybe this is where they can get away with it. Picture-in-picture, very big in some sports leagues, obviously very big in pro wrestling. Could NBC Sports Philly work something out with one of their sponsors or multiple sponsors to go to picture-in-picture? Now, we want to hear the Duran entrance music, so this isn't quite the same thing as we mute the video of the wrestling match or of the game or the race or whatever, and then we're still getting like 60% of the screen is full with full audio of the commercial. Is there a sponsor that is willing to do a picture-in-picture commercial break in order for people to get to enjoy the Duran entrance? Like, think about it. Okay, like, play this one out. I'm not saying this is a good idea, but I'm saying it might be a great idea. All right, let's say Papa John's wants to sponsor Phillies games, right? Papa John's wants to run commercials during Phillies games. Duran is about to come out for the 9th inning. Papa John's is going to get a 30-second ad spot followed by like Cure Auto Insurance or something, right? Well, if you're NBC Sports Philly and you have this minute-long commercial break you need to take, do you go to Papa John's and or Cure Auto Insurance and say, listen, you guys can have these full-screen advertisements, right? We'll get you in the 9th inning, right? Going into the top of the 9th, into Duran coming out to pitch. Or we can do a picture-in-picture ad. Sure, there's no audio, but we can fill up the screen with a ton of your advertising, a ton of your branding, and even make a note that, like, Duran's entrance is brought to you by Papa John's. Use promo code SPIDER or Durantula or something for 10% off your next order. I would almost guarantee you that if a sponsor were to forego their typical full screen, full audio ad and instead offer a promo code for a percentage off of a pizza or whatever for a picture-in-picture where you still get to experience the Duran entrance, I would guess that might end up resulting in more sales than that one regular ad is going to. I would love to know. I mean, food to me kind of makes the most sense. Could you go to an Uber Eats? Could you go to a DoorDash and have the same conversation? Like, maybe that's where you say, all right, from a user experience, from a viewer experience perspective, the viewer would rather see Duran's entrance. But hey, while Duran's coming out to the game, let's throw a 10 or 15% off your next pizza on the screen. I'll tell you what, I might actually be the one to sign up. I might be one to go order a Papa John's pizza, even though it's not my favorite pizza, specifically because it would allow for me to see the Duran entrance. You got Zero here, by the way. Zero Cool 78. I don't think I've seen Zero Cool before. Zero, thanks for being here. Like the video, share the video, subscribe. Says announcement, Duran brought to you by, the Duran entrance is brought to you by Papa John's. Use 15%, or you get 15% off when you use the promo code Duran. All right, cool. Guess what we're doing? We're ordering Papa John's. Let's get Taco Bell in on it, right? Remember the Taco Bell, like if they steal a base in the All-Star game or whatever, everybody gets a free taco? Like, why don't we do that? Let's get Taco Bell. Live Mas with Duran. Oh, just an idea. I'm just a guy. I'm not saying it's a great idea. I'm merely suggesting that it might be worth a look. Might be worth a thought. Yeah, I like to be a little bit creative in advertising. It's something that I like to do. I think that there are creative ways to go about doing things. We might hear some stuff about that at some point in the not-too-distant future. We'll see. We'll see. I'll let you know. But the JT Realmuto home run, going back to it, was a beautiful microcosm of this resurgence that he's had since a woeful month of May. And you have to feel really good for JT Realmuto on a few levels. One, on a human level, you have to feel good for the guy. That where it seemed like things had really fallen off a cliff, he's kind of back to being the guy that we expect him to be. While the power numbers have been what they've been, they're not like insane. He didn't have a home run in the month of June. He had 2 in July. He has 2 so far in August. It's a clutch hit. It is a powerful moment for this team and for a club that is still, I think, trying to figure out a way to balance this horrible news about Zach Wheeler missing time, perhaps missing the season. We found out on Monday's show, we got the breaking news that Wheeler had gone through a procedure to break up the clot. The veterans on this team are probably still trying to figure out a way to kind of balance that idea of we're kind of keeping it business as usual, and at the same time, you're kind of using the Wheeler blood clot and recovery as kind of like a galvanizing thing, as a rallying cry for the team, like let's win it for Wheels. It's cool to see guys like Realmuto getting to step up. I mean, listen, Kyle Schwarber has had a million accolades this season, and there are certainly, he's making a case to be considered strongly for NL MVP. We all know about Bryce Harper. We all know about the love that this fan base has for Bryce Harper. Trey Turner's had a weird season. I think the entire Trey Turner tenure here, unless things drastically change, will always kind of go down as one of those, oh, that didn't go exactly how we wanted it to. Nick Castellanos right now is in the midst of kind of becoming a platoon player because the results just haven't been there. It's cool to see a guy like Realmuto get something going in a positive direction, and here he is in a career or in a contract year, and you have to start wondering if you're the Phillies, how much has his production over the last 2 months impacted what you're willing to give him, but maybe even more importantly, what he thinks he is worth and what he's willing to take. You know, if there was a scenario here where the Phillies could get a JT Realmuto who was playing at 60% of what you expect him to be, could they have found a path to bringing him back on a 2, maybe 3-year contract at a lower number? Does his play over the last couple of months change that now, where he believes he's worth $20, $25 million a year because he still plays a premium position at catcher? I think, if you're the Phillies or any other team, you're probably looking at a scenario where Realmuto is going to have to change positions at some point in the next 2 years, you would think, or maybe he's going to play half his games a catcher, half as a DH, or half a catcher, half at first base. Then you have this weird thing, right, with Schwarber where he's your DH, and Harper might have to go back to the outfield. Harper said that he's willing to go to the outfield if they get the right guy at first base. Well, what if Realmuto has to move to first base because, catchers have a certain shelf life before their knees give out, before they start having a lot of legitimate issues? Would Harper move to the outfield so that Realmuto could play first? But then that means who's going to play catcher? And who do they have in the farm system to play catcher? A lot of things that we have to figure out, but the positive is you don't have to figure them out right now. But what we can figure out is that the Phillies, things are kind of looking okay. They're starting to look a little bit better. The Wheeler thing, very upsetting. Although, it's good that they caught it when they did. And I think I said the other day, kudos to the Phillies doctors. And in the time since, we've learned it was actually the Nationals doctors who caught it. It was the Nationals doctors who were able to find the blood clot and take the new symptoms, the deadening of the arm, into account. And it was the Nationals doctors who ended up finding it. That's not to take a shot at the Phillies doctors. Obviously, symptoms change over time. What you're able to see and how you're able to see it can change over time. But kudos to the Nationals doctors for finding that blood clot. Okay. I want to now pivot to a couple of other things, but in the meantime, I'm going to pull up the comments section. So down here, bottom right side of the screen, if you're new to the show, this is where the comments will go. We've already had a bunch coming in across YouTube. They'll start populating there from now until the end of the show. I just forgot to bring them up in the beginning. So in the meantime, we'll bring up some of the comments live on screen. So Chris Freed over on YouTube asks, is this a live at the bank episode, or are you going to have Anthony report live during your show? I reached out to Anthony Sanfilippo, and I was like, hey, you want to come on to talk about a couple of Phillies things? And he's like, I got to go do the Phillies game. And I said, well, aren't you just an ass? You punk. He's down there covering the game. He's thrilled, I'm sure. Nothing would make the other Phillies writers happier than having Anthony be loud and boisterous on this show from the press box. That could be a lot of fun. Video guy Amadeus here says you have to consider re-signing JT at this rate. I think you have to. Question again is, what's the term? What's the AAV? That's ultimately what it's going to come down to. If the Phillies were hoping that they were going to be able to get Realmuto back here at 10 or 15 million, and now he's playing himself into a 20-25 range because he plays catcher, and he's been hitting very well this season, and he's still a beast behind the plate. I don't know. What's Dave Dombrowski going to do? Boy, you rolled the dice with Schwarber. Now you kind of rolled the dice with Realmuto. Ain't coming up Dombrowski. Tony Louie over on YouTube says 28 days until Flyers training camp starts. Until then, I'll be twiddling my thumbs and staring at the ceiling fan. Well, Tony, I have news for you. You want some breaking Flyers news? I got some breaking Flyers news. I'll give you some news that hasn't been reported anywhere else. I got no news. There's no news whatsoever. I said this question here from Jim Grasso. Is Mishkov back from Russia? I don't know. So it's interesting. Mishkov was playing abroad. He played in the KHL versus NHL Russian Stars game. He played in a 3v3 tournament. We saw him score at Michigan. He did a couple of interviews over in Russia. I don't know if he's back yet. I'm not sure that it really matters. It's not as if he's not going to come back to the team, to the country. Flyers camp being 28 days away is interesting. Not because 28 was Claude Giroux's number, but 28 days away is interesting because I think that most people who care about the Flyers still don't exactly know what to expect from the team. And we'll talk about the Flyers ad nauseum on this show when training camp starts and when the season is back in full swing. But it's interesting that things haven't really changed in the discussion around the team. Like the way that this team is being looked at, so much of it is kind of based around the goalies, right? And if you'll notice, and you probably have, after the Carter Hart acquittal, there was a whole lot of scuttlebutt about, are the Flyers going to bring back Carter Hart? Would Carter Hart be open to rejoining the Philadelphia Flyers? And then I think it was Frank Saravalli that put it out. But there was this notion that, like, no one is actually having the conversation internally in a meaningful way with the Flyers or any other team, because there are still potential punishments that are going to be levied by the NHL. Most notably that they're going to have to appeal to get back into the league. And there could be suspensions. There could be fines. There could be additional things that any of the players who were part of that trial, of the Hockey Canada trial, are going to have to clear in order to get back into the league. I have heard nothing. I have heard nothing in recent weeks that would give me the indication that, oh, yes, the Flyers are ready with a contract on their desk, ready to pass it across for Carter Hart's signature, pending Gary Bettman letting him back in the league. I've got no indication that that's the case. So, as things stand right now, you are very much looking at a Sam Ersson and Dan Vladar goalie tandem, probably Ivan Fedotov and Carson Bjarnason down with the Phantoms, and then you have Alexei Kolosov just kind of floating out there in the ether. No idea what to make of that, or what to make of him, or what to make of his future in the National Hockey League. The question, I think, is going to remain out there. Will Kolosov end up being a guy that teams are willing to consider trading for? And I think if they are, Kolosov is going to have to accept an assignment to the AHL. That'll be a major contingency for any team that wants to acquire him. I think that there are enough teams right now that know what he was able to produce with Dynamo Minsk. They saw what we all saw last year, which was a guy who looked pretty overmatched in the NHL, but is still young enough and is still dynamic enough that with the right coaching, with the right development in the AHL, could ultimately be an NHL goalie. Now, maybe not a shutdown guy, certainly not a bona fide stud, but at least an NHL backup. That could be in play. If Kolosov and his camp are willing for him to report to an AHL team, maybe spend part of a season with the AHL team, and then an injury pops up and boom, he ends up on an NHL team, cool. I don't see a path to it in Philadelphia. I still think that ultimately Ivan Fedotov and Bjarnason are your tandem in Lehigh Valley. And then, of course, you've got Vladar and Ersson vying for time, with Ersson probably being the guy, the leader in the clubhouse for the bulk of the starting minutes in net for the Flyers this year. But it is interesting, and we had this, we talked about the fact that Tyson Forster, the news is getting a little bit more positive. The thought is that he could be ready for the start of the season, maybe not the start of training camp. Still haven't gotten firm confirmation there that that is the timeline. Still haven't gotten full-on confirmation that the infection is totally cleared, or whatever the issue was that led to the infection is fully healed or cleared. Until we get that, kind of hard to know. But if you're a hockey fan, if you're a Flyers fan, and you aren't as locked in on the Phillies, or you don't care about Eagles training camp notes and stats in the NFL preseason, if you are a Flyers-only fan, 28 days. And then we are locked and loaded with the Philadelphia Flyers until next March, April, maybe May, maybe June. No, definitely not. But maybe. Now, I do want to get to a team that we do expect to have a lengthy run, a deep run into the postseason. And that is none other than your team, your town, your Philadelphia Eagles. And the reason that I bring up the Philadelphia Eagles is because we got to see one of the people that I tend to look at and say, this is a pretty good gauge on where the national media stands on this team. This is a guy who is very, very good at giving us the national perspective on how national media view the Philadelphia Eagles. And that's Colin Cowherd. Now, what does Colin Cowherd do? We have had conversations on this show, and we have dissected some of his statements about Jalen Hurts in the past, and that he doesn't seem to believe that Jalen Hurts belongs in the upper echelon of quarterbacks, maybe not even in the first two tiers, because he is of the belief that it's a stacked offensive line, incredible running back, great wide receiving duo, really strong tight end, and that because Hurts isn't called upon to be a guy that needs to lead the way for his team and win games outright for his team, since he isn't leaned on in that way, He can't be one of those top-tier guys. Now, I fundamentally disagree with that. I don't think you can hold the overall value of the supporting cast against a guy. I'm very much on the record here. Not the biggest Joe Burrow guy. Recognize the talent. Also recognize the fact that their defense sucks. They often fall behind early in games. Burrow has to kind of dig them out of a hole. He gets to throw the rock around. He also has a great wide receiver duo in Chase and Higgins, something that a lot of times it feels like people like to gloss over. He does have a legitimate wide receiver duo. And he puts up gaudy stats. And then you see Joe Burrow get put in at like number 3 on quarterback power ranking lists. And then you see like Jalen Hurts end up at number 9. You kind of want to pull your hair out. And in the case of me, where I have a 5 or maybe a 6 head, I don't want to pull any more of this lettuce out, because if I do, then it becomes like a 7 or an 8 head. And that just isn't good for anybody. Colin Cowherd, though, he released his power rankings. So the herd hierarchy, as he calls it. He ranked out the top 10 teams in the NFL, and it's a lengthy clip. It's something that, while I appreciate it and I think is wonderful, it's not what I'm really concerned with. I'm concerned with, where did he put your team, your town, your Philadelphia Eagles? And if I told you that Colin Cowherd put the Buffalo Bills at number 2, your head probably would go to, oh, he's got the Chiefs at number 1. Or maybe your head goes to, oh, maybe he's very bullish on Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry in year 2 of playing together, and maybe he's got Baltimore as the number 1 team. But would you be surprised, and perhaps you would you be surprised to know that Colin Cowherd did not put Kansas City number 1? He did not put Baltimore at number 1. No. Colin Cowherd put the Eagles in a very prominent position. Let's go out to Colin Cowherd. We'll let him be the one to reveal where he put the Philadelphia Eagles.
Listen, not only was their defense number 1 last year, I looked it up this morning, it was the youngest defense in the league and the cheapest. So they do everything right. I don't.
Spoiler alert. You just saw it on screen. If you're listening to the podcast feed after the fact, all right, spoiler alert. He's got the Eagles number 1. Citing the defense, the youth of the defense, the cost of the defense. Let's continue.
I think they're as good at quarterback. I think when you can force Philadelphia to play from behind and you can force them to throw, they're not as dangerous as a Buffalo is forced to throw, or a Kansas City is.
So that is entirely built around this idea that Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes are vastly superior quarterbacks to Jalen Hurts. I think that for the most part, you will get a large segment of football fandom that would probably agree Josh Allen overall as a quarterback better than Jalen Hurts. You would certainly get a large plurality of the votership would say Patrick Mahomes, best quarterback of his generation, likely a better quarterback overall, right? Especially playing from behind than Jalen Hurts. We can, of course, point back to the fact that we often do on this show, which is that Jalen Hurts in 2 Super Bowls against Patrick Mahomes has outplayed Patrick Mahomes both times. We can leave that off to the side. We can also leave off to the side that, Jalen Hurts, reigning Super Bowl MVP, a guy who got the job done for your team, your town, your Philadelphia Eagles. But okay, we'll pull back a second. Colin Cowherd, very much of the opinion, all right, Mahomes, Josh Allen, he'd rather go to them with a need to come back late in the game. I think you could probably make that case for Mahomes. I'm not so sure that you could make the case for Josh Allen, but all right, we'll continue.
But again, they do everything well. They GM well. They quarterback well. Mm-hmm. Their line plays incredible. Saquon Barkley has just been jet fuel to an uber-talented roster. So there is my herd hierarchy.
And that's it. So he's right on a few levels, right? Howie Roseman, who I was very critical of for a very long time, probably does the GM thing better than any other GM in the National Football League, continues to find value along the margins. And it's funny, when Cincinnati was kind of lighting themselves on fire by, essentially making Trey Hendrickson available, the first thought was, oh, what's Howie going to offer? And everybody almost expected Howie Roseman to kind of swoop in and make a crazy trade for him. Now, to this point, there has been no real update on Trey Hendrickson or about him being moved. I saw a couple hours ago that the Raiders are apparently out there as a potential front runner for Hendrickson. But if you're the Eagles, you have the draft capital to be able to go after a guy like that. The question is, how do you make it work? How do you make it work with the cap? it's always interesting, though, because any name that becomes available, any big name that becomes available, immediately you think of the Philadelphia Eagles, and you think about the fact that Howie Roseman kind of works his voodoo magic on the salary cap. And yes, there are bad void years. And yes, the salary cap situation can be very tenuous if things go sideways with any of these players. And yes, Howie kind of, in a way, benefited from absolute incompetence in Washington by getting rid of Carson Wentz. That was Washington. Yes. Or was that Indy? He played at both. But he was able to get rid of Carson Wentz. He had Jalen Hurts already drafted. Many people questioned that decision to take Hurts in the second round at the time. But by being able to offload an awful Carson Wentz contract that would have had a ton of dead money if they had to cut him, they kind of got to clear the books. You probably aren't going to get another shot like that. And as things currently stand right now, the Eagles are kind of like in a house of cards when it comes to the cap situation and with potential void years on the end of some deals. But in the interim, they are as competitive as any team. They have the flexibility that's virtually as good as about any team in the National Football League. They do the GMing thing very, very well, if not better than anyone else. The coaching side of things is interesting because Jalen Hurts now, once again, has a different offensive coordinator. The poor guy can't get like 2 years of the same guy calling plays. That's a little bit problematic. Depends on how much you believe Nick Sirianni is involved in the planning of the game plan going into Sundays. It depends on how much you believe he's actually involved in the direct play calling within the game. If we are to believe that Nick Sirianni has had the majority of the play calling duties and the preparation in installing the game plan leading up to games, then maybe the offensive coordinator role isn't that important after all. And having Sirianni here really is the only consistency that Hurts needs. Now, if the success has kind of been in flux, and we know that 2023 season was dog doo-doo. If you are to kind of take that year out as an outlier, and it was contingent on the offensive coordinator being very, very good, we'll see how this looks this year. I have to imagine that at this point, Hurts, by virtue of being able to deliver 2 deep playoff runs, 2 Super Bowl runs, 1 Super Bowl win, he probably at this point has earned significant input into what works best for him so that when the game plan is being installed on a week-to-week basis, he's going to have more say than he might have had in the past, and we'll see how it works. But Colin Cowherd having the Eagles atop his NFL power rankings, atop his herd hierarchy, I thought was notable, and so I pass that along to you. Now, I'm going to go out here really quickly to the comments, and then we're going to go to our last topic of the day, which I find to be maybe the most intriguing thing that we have going. I know there was a Zero Cool 78 said that NBC might have just showed a very not great picture in a picture-in-picture, showed a fan's genitalia, perhaps, in a picture-in-picture. Don't know if that's true, but that's really funny if it happened. Let's see. Chris Freed asks, why do we suddenly care about what national blowhards say? I think it's good for perspective, right? Like, we know what's being said locally. We know what the radio stations are saying. We know what NBC Sports Philly says. We know what they're saying at The Athletic and at PHLY and at all the other outlets and at all of the podcasts that you care about. You have an idea of where people are landing. But sometimes I think it's great to have that national perspective. That's also why when hockey and basketball season roll around, I like to watch the national broadcast over the local broadcast because I like to have an idea of how do the national broadcasters and the national studio pundits, how do they feel about the Sixers and about the Flyers? Because we sometimes get very, very focused in on how we feel in the moment where this is our world, this is the only team that we're really focused in on, but sometimes I like that macro view on things. And, of course, like, over the years, you'll have a Reggie Miller have a total flub on a TNT telecast where he says something really stupid and off base about like one of the young Sixers players. And then you kind of roll your eyes and go, all right, well, way to go, Reggie. But on the whole, I like having that national perspective. And when you have it from somebody who has the kind of longevity in the industry that Cowherd does, I still think that it's notable. Peter Tom Willis, not a big Cowherd fan, though, says, don't try to understand his takes. He flips and flops worse than anyone. Interesting. Raymond Supper over on YouTube says, national media tends to favor quarterbacks that make pretty plays over efficient quarterbacks. That's true, which is why I'm always just kind of like down on Burrow, because it's like, I get it. The talent's there. The arm is there. But the slow starts are also there. Like, there's enough of a historical precedent here with the Bengals and with Burrow under center that, like, the team starts off slowly every year. And, yeah, you can always make the case. The defense sucks, and it does. The Bengals' defense is bad. Very, very bad. But at some point, like, if you're this transcendent generational quarterback, don't you still have to get the job done? Like, don't you still have to be able to rack up more points than your woeful defense gives up on a week-to-week basis? Maybe, maybe not. Let's see. Okay. I just saw Zero Cool with a clarification down there. You can see it in the box. All right, I want to get to the last thing. The last thing on today's show is what I think is one of the most interesting media stories. Now, on this show, The Russ Joy Show, which you can find on YouTube, X, Facebook, as well as in your favorite podcast app, we've been talking lately about TV deals and about streaming deals and about the fact that, like, WWE went to ESPN with their premium live events, but they're also maybe doing a one-off this year to counter-program AEW. We talked about the fact that UFC left ESPN, which helped it grow to a much bigger national audience, and now they're going to Paramount, and they're effectively killing off the pay-per-view model. All this stuff I find really interesting. And at the same time, we've seen some movement, right, with the NHL, where center ice is effectively gone. You can access many out-of-market games through ESPN+. I have long been of the opinion that regional sports networks, the RSNs that we've all kind of grown up on, are going to go the way of the dodo, and it's going to happen sooner rather than later. And the reason that I'm, like, so bullish on it is I just don't know how that model stands up now. I don't know who's sitting around on a day-to-day basis with NBC Sports Philly on in the background. I don't know how many people are actively tuning in to go watch the channel, the same way that we might have done in high school and even college when there was Daily News Live and Philly Sports Talk, and then you'd go into Sports Night, and then that would kind of lead you into pregame live, and it felt like you wanted to be locked in from like 5 o'clock on. If you weren't locked into Comcast Sportsnet back in the day from 5 o'clock up through the game and then to post-game live, it felt like there was a good chance you were going to miss something important along the way. You would get the perspective of the local writers on Daily News Live. You would get the happy, warm, welcoming, and the faces of the folks on Sports Night. And then you would go to pregame live. You'd kind of get yourself hyped up or get yourself feeling even worse about your team as it's, kind of falling apart. You watch the game, and then you either go get to feel the elation of the win after the fact, or you're there to hope that the post-game crew is going to tear into the team as it just blew another game. There was something about that 5 o'clock through post-game that felt necessary. And I don't know when that changed, and it's kind of hard to say because I was at high school 04 to 08, college 08 to 2012. And in the course of those years, it does feel like the behavior and the viewing behavior of sports fans changed. And as we started seeing more streaming services kind of making their way into sports, we started to see that there was a decentralization of the user experience. So you no longer felt like you needed to tune into your regional sports network at 5 o'clock and watch all the way through postgame. No, now you could just kind of cherry pick little clips on social media. And even now, you can cherry pick clips that go around from pregame live or postgame live from NBC Sports Philly. You'll catch those on X. You can catch them on TikTok. Whoever clips them up, you can find that stuff now. You, even to some extent, if you don't want to, you don't have to watch the games anymore. I mean, you can look at somebody locally like Nick Piccone, who clips up all of the Phillies highlights, right? And then does like the Phillies radio and then Phillies TV and then the opponent's radio and the opponent's TV call. And now you're being served this experience that is far beyond what you're getting by sitting there watching the entire game. Now you don't have to sit through the 2.5 hour game. You can kind of jump in and kind of jump out when you need to. And maybe you're not as locked into every single pitch, but instead you get the notification, oh, Realmuto just hit a home run to go up 6-4. Let's go check out Nick Piccone's work. Here's how it sounded on Mariners radio. Like, that's interesting. And it's part of the ever-changing landscape of how sports fans actually take in the games. And so This is a very, very long intro into the final topic, but it has to do with Major League Baseball because if you remember on this show, we talked about the news when it broke that ESPN was effectively bailing out on Major League Baseball, that they no longer had the interest in keeping Sunday Night Baseball beyond the season, and that they felt like the NBA and even the NHL and certainly the NFL were better overall investments for their brand, and that maybe declining numbers with Major League Baseball were becoming a little bit more problematic than Major League Baseball wanted them to be. But what's interesting is that the news broke yesterday, and it was a report. It's not confirmed yet, but there was a report that was going around by Kendall Baker from over at Yahoo Sports. And so I'm actually going to throw out to Kendall Baker's tweet from yesterday. And this has all of the scoops, and then I think a couple of them have been updated since yesterday. But man, it is a fundamental changing of how baseball is going to be covered by the national media, because you're not just going to go to like ESPN for Sunday Night Baseball. No. This is very different now. So this was the scoop that went out on Tuesday night. So Kendall Baker puts out, scoop, MLB rights deals are, quote, close to being done, end quote, per sources. What I'm hearing, Apple is fully out. Remember, they've been doing the Friday night game, the game that's the hardest one to find because not everybody has Apple TV Plus. So that would effectively end Friday Night Baseball unless somebody picks it up. NBC Peacock is in for Friday, the Apple package, and Sunday exclusive and wild card. And so the Sunday exclusive is interesting because that would mean that NBC Peacock would then be getting Sunday Night Baseball. So NBC Peacock swoops in potentially, picks up the Apple package for Friday night and Sunday Night Baseball from ESPN. That is a hell of a bit of news. But maybe even more interesting is the next part. MLB TV being sold to ESPN for a boatload of money. Why is that big? Because what did we just see happen? We saw a merging, right, an acquisition of some assets, including NFL Network by ESPN. The NFL then got equity in ESPN. Now you're adding to that. You're adding to having the NFL Network now under the umbrella, along with Red Zone under the umbrella of ESPN. You have the NHL, right? A lot of those out-of-market games are already available, kind of replacing center ice. That's available through ESPN. And if MLB TV goes to ESPN and they're able to kind of mitigate the downside of the blackout restrictions, that would now mean that the NHL and MLB have pretty much every game available to stream other than some of the national games held by other partners. All of that would live on an ESPN platform, on some version of an ESPN streaming platform. And oh, by the way, they've got Red Zone and they've got the NFL Network. The final note in this was that Netflix gets the Home Run Derby, which would also be really interesting. And like, listen, Netflix has made it no secret that they want to get into the live sports market. Now, Netflix didn't end up getting UFC. They didn't end up getting anything additional with the WWE beyond they have Raw, right? There is a deal internationally, Netflix, with pretty much all of the shows, but in the U.S. at least, they have Raw. They have the show Unreal. There might be a couple of other shows that they're going to be able to kind of spin off of it, but they don't have like SmackDown. They don't have the premium live events. Those all go to ESPN. They don't have the rights to any of these major leagues. Now, there's been the Netflix package, right, with NFL. Remains to be seen what else Netflix is going to do. Them getting the Home Run Derby is a lot of fun. I'm sure they could do all kinds of stuff to lead into it. Netflix would be really smart to do some kind of a show, kind of like 24/7, kind of like Hard Knocks maybe, following some of the participants in the Home Run Derby, maybe for a week or two leading up to it, and then kind of showing you a behind-the-scenes look at the Home Run Derby itself and the fallout from the Home Run Derby. Like, that could be a lot of fun. So all of this kind of came out, right? And then right after this, Kendall Baker puts out, nothing's finalized, which of course means things could still change, but it sounds close. And then also noting ESPN's new DTC, direct-to-consumer app and app experience launch on Thursday. So then there was an update. And so he also kind of throws that here. MLB TV is a subscription service offering all out-of-market games. It's MLB's version of Sunday Ticket. MLB TV is not MLB Network, so it wouldn't be the same thing as bringing in NFL Network under the ESPN umbrella. And then there were also a couple of things on Update, getting more confirmation on MLB TV to ESPN and Home Run Derby to Netflix. The part about Apple being out and NBC Peacock being in, still more up in the air. Based on conversations, Apple is a bit more of a mystery. All of this got me thinking, though. On one hand, you had ESPN that just did not seem to value Major League Baseball the way that Rob Manfred wanted ESPN to value Major League Baseball. And you see how important it is for every streaming service to get live sports rights. It cannot be overstated just how important having live sports rights are to Netflix, to HBO Max, to Paramount, to Amazon Prime Video. They all want to have live viewers. And why? Because, one, there is a built-in experience and a repeated visitor experience from sports fans that are going to go wherever the leagues are. NFL fans, for the most part, are going to subscribe because they want to see their teams play. You're going to get basketball fans, hockey fans, in this case, baseball fans, that are going to now subscribe maybe to the direct-to-consumer product from ESPN. And if they're cord cutters, this even makes the $30 a month price tag seem even more palatable. Now you get the NHL, you get MLB, you get the NFL Network, you probably end up getting Red Zone out of it. Like, it's a pretty damn good deal at $30 a month if you're a cord cutter. And if you're a cable subscriber, unless you're on like YouTube TV like me, and you don't get the DDC product, it's pretty damn good value. It's a nice little add-on if you're a cable subscriber. So, all of this is to say, I find it interesting that you see Peacock get in on it, you see Netflix get in on it. That then tells me that to some extent there's a possibility that HBO Max and maybe even Amazon Prime Video were in the running to try to get some kind of a package out of it. It's just interesting. I think the whole thing is really, really interesting. And the ESPN product to me, maybe more so than anything, is truly interesting in this. I think I mentioned on Monday, Brian Curtis on the press box had Jimmy Pitaro on, who runs ESPN, right? And they talked about the fact that there's this customized Sports Center experience that they're going to be delivering with this new ESPN direct-to-consumer product. Presumably, they are going to have a way to present you as a Philadelphia Phillies fan or a Philadelphia sports fan a localized version of Sports Center that might not have to show up at 5 o'clock in your feed, but will be available to you on demand. Perhaps you are one of those nasty fans that somehow supports the Cowboys and the Lakers and the Yankees and like Notre Dame or something. And now you're going to have your own customized Sports Center for your janky-ass 90s front-running team fandom. Oh, but my dad was a fan. Oh, my grandfather was a fan. Shut the hell up. Be a grown-ass adult and like the teams that you want to like. I digress. If they're going to present you a customized Sports Center, right, and now you also have Major League Baseball, NHL, some NFL assets as well, well, all of a sudden, that decentralized fandom that I talked about, that user journey, that viewer journey that once was in place with your regional sports network where you would watch a daily news live, lead into pregame live, into the game, into postgame live, while that has largely died off, you're going to essentially get a customized version of that with ESPN, right? Like, if you get this customized Sports Center, and then they feed you into a pregame show that maybe is for the league, right? Maybe is for Major League Baseball. It's more of a league-wide pregame show, but they're touching on your favorite team as well, or it's an NHL game, they're touching on your favorite team as well. Then you have your game, and then post-game, they hit you with another like customized Sports Center, and then Scott Van Pelt is on later on. They're going to keep you in that app. And then they're also going to be able to feed you recommended content. That, like, if you're trying to navigate away from something on the live feed on this ESPN app, maybe they hit you with like a best of Phillies. Maybe they hit you with like some kind of a Phillies yearbook for '08. I think that ESPN product that people kind of scoffed at initially is going to effectively replace regional sports networks. The way that I thought RSNs were going to die off, and you can go back, you can check episodes from 2024 of this show, you can go back to episodes of Snow the Goalie from a year ago. I've been saying for a long time, I think the RSNs are going to die. And what will ultimately happen is you're going to see a streaming platform come in, and that streaming service is going to try to buy the rights to all the games, the same way that Apple TV has Major League Soccer. I thought there was a very good chance you would see somebody come in, swoop in, and pick up all of the out-of-market games. It happened with the NHL, with ESPN. I did not expect it to happen with Major League Baseball, but if they are going to acquire MLB TV and you're going to get all the out-of-market games as well, it kind of removes the need for regional sports networks. And in fairness, if you've been somebody who's subscribed to cable for practically no other reason than wanting to be able to keep up with your teams, well, now not only do you have a service that's going to serve you, your team, and your team's games, but they're also going to give you all the games so that, like, all right, Phillies game's out of rain delay. I have 8 other games that I can pick from in the same app. Yeah, that's kind of a game changer. That's certainly something that's going to move the needle for a lot of sports fans. I have to admit, though, I didn't think ESPN was going to be the one to do it. I thought that you would get an HBO Max or a Paramount that needed the subscribers desperately. They were going to swoop in, or an Amazon that has more money than God, that they would kind of swoop in and they'd be the ones to do it, or that a Netflix that wants more and more live content, that they'd be the ones to swoop in. But it does look like, at least as of right now, ESPN is going to be the one to get it done. All right, I'm going to go over to the comments here because I want to see what people have to say about the media news, which I thought was some of the most interesting stuff. Peter Tom Willis says, in Albuquerque, I've paid for Philly sports for decades, happily. Chris Freed weighs in, says, the big story with these MLB media deals is they all conclude in 28 when MLB wants to bundle all local media deals in a single contract. Bundling local media is the future for pro sports. And again, I think that's probably true, and I think that's probably correct. And that's why I've been very bullish on the death of regional sports networks. I've also posited the idea here that, like, while they're operating in different parts of the business, NBC Sports Philly is still owned ultimately by the same parent company as Peacock. And at some point, it would make sense to me that in the same way that, like, WGN out of Chicago is able to air all the Cubs games and they have some national distribution and you can watch Cubs games all the time, it's always kind of made sense to me. Like, why wouldn't NBC/Comcast, why wouldn't they ultimately want you to be able to watch every Phillies game, every Flyers game, maybe every Sixers game, all from the comfort of the Peacock app? Maybe it'll happen. I don't know. We'll see. Peter also says, I've never been into UFC, but it being included in a subscription I already have, I'll become a fan. And that's a big part of what Paramount is kind of banking on, is that people who might not have given UFC a chance because of the hefty price tag for a lot of the pay-per-views, if you get rid of the pay-per-view model, maybe the cost of the service is going to go up. I would expect it would, because that was, a $1.1 billion per year deal. I'd expect Paramount Plus's subscription price to go up. If you're there for shows like Dexter Resurrection, which, again, had an amazing episode last week, chances are you're probably still going to pay for it. Mr. Bo 99 says it's that time in the summer where baseball has become monotonous. I think there's probably some truth to that. Also, sounds like the Phillies have gone on a wee bit of a run. They've padded that lead. I'm obviously not watching it while we're doing the game here, but it's now 8-2. The only thing they could do right now is what Peter says here: bring in Romero. I think he means Romano. If you bring in Jordan Romano, not Ray Romano. If you bring in Jordan Romano, you might actually get to see Duran today. It's a good point. Amadeo says ESPN really needs to bring the multi-view feature to every platform. Well, that's where, like, YouTube TV's done a great job of kind of expanding it and allowing you to customize the multi-view a little bit better. ESPN's going to have to do it. I mean, if they're going to have all of the games, get me 4, 6, maybe even 8 games on the screen at the same time. That could be fun. Peter Tom Willis asks, what is the price increase of ESPN going to be? So ESPN Plus is going to still exist in its own ecosystem. This DTC, the direct-to-consumer product of ESPN, their new app, meant for cord cutters, is going to be $29.99 a month. But that is essentially for cord cutters. Now, if you have a cable subscription, it is supposed to be included. So a lot of the streaming that you would do through that app, you'll also have access to. $29.99 is a lot of money. But again, if you're going to be bringing all of the out-of-market games in, I don't know. Is it a bad price? I don't know. Let's see. Raymond Sepper says, here in Tampa, hockey is going over-the-air TV this season, and all a cord cutter needs is an indoor antenna. Fans were complaining about blackouts on streaming services. It's interesting. Over-the-air. Pretty wild. I wonder how they make the financials of that work out. How do the economics of that work out? Chris Freed says, think of a pregame show that uses images and voices of Callis or Gene Hart. That is the future. I don't think we're going to get there. I'd be shocked if we got there. Where they're like going to use AI voices, AI voice clones of the announcers of yesteryear. I can't imagine that would happen, but we'll see. All right, I think that's a good place to end for today. Phillies are in the midst of probably wrapping up a win against the Mariners, which would mark a very successful series against a team that would essentially close out a nice sweep. And again, they won 2 of their last 3 against the Nationals down in D.C., so get a little bit of momentum going here. And then they'll be welcoming the Nationals back to town into Philadelphia on Friday. They have an off day Thursday, so we shall hope, right, that things are going to continue to trend in the right direction with the Philadelphia Phillies, and we'll be back on Friday. Now, will there be a new episode of Snow the Goalie this week? I don't know. We're working on a whole bunch of stuff. I think that one of the Dev Camp interviews will go up on the channel this week. We've been dealing with some stuff in the background here with Snow the Goalie. There are a bunch of things that we're working our way through right now. They're all good, but we're working through a few things. And Bundy, I believe, is on vacation. I was on vacation last week, so we'll keep you posted, if nothing else. And I see Video Guy Amadeus in the comments, so he'll know. We'll put up one of the Dev Camp interviews, if nothing else, this week on the Snow the Goalie channel. Bear with us. As somebody pointed out earlier, 28 days away from training camp, and then you're going to be getting a lot of Snow the Goalie in your life. So, until later this week, until Friday, this has been the Russ Joy Show, and I've been Russ Joy, but you knew that already because you're smart, and it's also the name of the show. Thanks for joining me on YouTube, Facebook, and X. You can find the show wherever you get your podcasts. I'll talk to all of you Friday here on the Russ Joy Show. Bye now.